the last topic is mine, and I wanted to talk about quarterbacks in the NFL playing longer because of the rules, the game being a lot less physical, I guess I'll say. Um, and I think it's bad for their teams and the young guys behind them. Last year there were six at the start of the season. Josh McCown is included in that. Obviously, he didn't finish the season, but there were six quarterbacks going into the league last year that were 35 or older. Obviously, Peyton Manning was 39 or 40, I guess, when the season started, and he's the only one that retired. Everybody else that was on that list is back. Josh McCown obviously isn't starting or shouldn't start. I don't know. We'll see what happens in Cleveland. Cleveland doesn't make any sense. But the majority of those guys that were on that list have backups in place. The only one who doesn't have a clear young guy that was drafted to take his place is Carson Palmer. They've recently said that their backup right now, whose name escapes me for some reason, he can be their starting quarterback in the future, but it depends on Carson Palmer. The thing is, all of these guys, I think the only one who's got a contract beyond 2 more years is Tony Romo. His contract expires at age 40. He'll be 40 when his contract expires. Carson Palmer's got 1 year left in his contract. He's 36. Tom Brady's got 3 years left. The next 2 seasons after this one are $22.4 million, and that'll expire when he's 40. Drew Brees has a $30 million cap hit right here in the last year of his contract. Drew Brees is already in a contract dispute, essentially, with his team because he wants to continue getting paid like what he's been historically, despite slightly declining. Tom Brady looked pretty rough at the beginning of last season, and the list goes on. You look around at these guys. Tony Romo didn't finish the season. Carson Palmer's had his injury issues really ever since he tore his ACL. None of these guys are guys that you can trust at their ages to play 16 games, to produce like they have in their primes, but they've produced so much over their careers and are still playing well enough where it's hard to figure out, A, how to pay them, and B, how much longer they're going to be around. Can you afford to pay Drew Brees $30 million, have him take up that much of your cap on a team that has serious holes on defense? The Cardinals are in pretty good shape right now, but depending on what Carson Palmer's next contract is going to be, will that continue to be the case? Do you re-sign Carson Palmer? So on and so forth. Drew Stanton was the guy that I was talking about. They said could be their next quarterback. No one, with the NFL being a quarterback's league, quote unquote, I can't imagine you letting Carson Palmer go just because Drew Stanton is cheaper, or whatever the case may be. The Cowboys have professed their love for Tony Romo so many times. New York refuses to let Eli Manning ride off into the sunset, so on and so forth. Teams are doing everything they can to keep these old quarterbacks on their team because of what they produced in the past. But once you get to a point, had Peyton Manning not gotten hurt, you wouldn't have seen Brock Osweiler at any point in his rookie contract outside of preseason games, and you would have had no idea what his value was going into another team. I feel like that's something you're going to see with a lot of these guys. Dak Prescott is the first guy that comes to mind because I think that his rookie contract expires the same year as Tony Romo's contract currently does. So if Tony Romo does manage to survive that whole contract, Prescott might walk out and you have no idea what his value is. And I think that's really hard for the league. It's really hard for those teams. And I think you're going to see more of these contract disputes like you've got with Drew Brees right now, because most of these guys aren't going to want to take pay cuts, especially with younger guys like Kirk Cousins is making $2 million more than Carson Palmer, and you can't tell me he's a better quarterback than Carson Palmer is, regardless of his age.
Well, I'm going to say this about quarterbacks because we were mentioning the age of quarterbacks, and I pull up ESPN's Total QBR. Carson Palmer was first last year, and he's 36, 37. Brees was third, and Brees is 37 as well, 38.
38.
Let's see. Okay, so Ben is older too. Ben's about 32, 33, and he's like 37 with all the hits he takes. Um, so Kurt, Tyrod, Alex Smith. Alex Smith's older. Well, he's about 28, 29. Aaron Rodgers is 32. Tom Brady was 11th, and he's 38. I think it's like this. Um, with older quarterbacks, yes, you always do need to keep in mind that this could be the season that they fall apart. But I feel like you plan for that in the contracts. I feel like you pay him what he's worth. Breeze last year, even though people say he declined, and I think there is some parts of him that decline a bit. I honestly think that Breeze is more or less just as good as he was. I personally think this is a situation where the weapons around him are declining more than what he's actually declining. Like Marcus Colston, more or less last year was a corpse. Like he couldn't move last year. Who they lost Jimmy and replaced him with Max Unger. You know what I mean? He didn't really have the Robert Meacham, um, Devery Henderson type deep threat. He made what's the guy's name, Allen? You're good with the obscure names. What was Willie Snead last year?
Uh-huh.
And he turned him into a pretty good wideout. You know what I mean? So I feel like you have to pay these guys what they're worth. Carson Palmer was my MVP last year. Everybody knows that. And I know he was older, but I feel like Bruce, that system that he's in, really helped him. Carson was highly accurate on the most difficult throws down the field last year, and I think that was a testament to Carson still having pretty good arm strength, his wide receivers having good catch radiuses, and he was insanely accurate on those last year. It's always a risk when you're paying older quarterbacks big money, but you have to pay them what they're worth because if you don't, other teams will.
Uh, Speaking to that, I agree and disagree at the same time. I do feel like you have to pay them what they're worth, but at the same time, when you're paying someone, you're paying them for what they will do, not for what they've done in the past. And I feel like that's the line that GMs and owners tend to have the hardest time navigating because it could be an instance where we talked about Tom Brady earlier, how terrible he looked earlier on, but as soon as he got Gronk back, he looked like an MVP caliber type player. Now, as they age, as they get older, it's basically like a circle to me, the circle of life in football, where when they first come in, when the quarterback first comes into the league, they need to have that talent around them. They got to have a run game. They got to have receivers who can catch. Got to have a safety blanket at tight end. Got to have a decent defense. But then as they progress, they get into their prime, they don't need that. Aaron Rodgers, he didn't need that. Tom Brady, he didn't need that. Peyton Manning, he didn't need that. They didn't need that as they were going through their prime because they could carry a team. But now that they're older, it reverts back to like in their earlier years. They can't carry a team for 16 games anymore. They can't carry them to the Super Bowl because they need that extra help. And I feel like that's what it is. They just need more help now. We're used to seeing them carry a team. Like Breeze, he wasn't as terrible as people think, but because the Saints as a whole were so bad, never mind that the Saints defense was historically bad again. It's just they even though they've always been bad on defense, he's been able to carry them with how good he has played. But he can't do that anymore, and people still expect him to do that. So now it's he couldn't. Who cares if the defense gave up 600 yards and 48 points? Why can't you? He was able to win before. Why can't he still do it? And that's the problem people fall in. And then you also have the fact that when you get an old quarterback, it could just fall off immediately. Like, hate to do this to you, AJ, but Peyton this year. He went from 2014 looking amazing to after he got hurt against San Diego, it just fell off completely. And he was not the same all last year. At the end of the year, 2 years ago, he just wasn't the same player. And that's the risk you run with an older player at any position, but especially a quarterback, because if you got, like we were just talking in the last topic, Andre Johnson. If Andre Johnson isn't performing, you can take him out throwing a young guy, But if your starting quarterback doesn't perform, it throws off your entire team. Unless you got a historically great defense with Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware. Not gonna say no, you know what I'm saying? But that's the risk you run. And I think it's like with the NBA with Dwayne Wade and Miami Heat. Dwayne Wade wanted to get paid for what he did in the past when Pat Riley was looking towards the future. You gotta run that risk, and I think you gotta try to toe the line. And I think with what Alan said before, with the rules changes, it makes it so much easier because if you breathe on the quarterback now, it's a penalty. So that's just how I feel. I mean, it's a hard line to navigate, but you can't just give them money just because you think they might be able to do something still when they could just fall off at any money. Just give them 1-year contracts.
I think it goes a little bit back towards our running theme about developing the younger quarterbacks. The thing is I mean, I know I'm not a NFL GM or anything like that, but if you get a good quarterback, shit, you're going to ride them till the wheels fall off because you're not guaranteed to get another quarterback. No, there's only been a few instances where you have a team with a historically good to great quarterback, lose that guy, and then still continue with another great quarterback. Only teams I can think about is the Packers going from Favre to Rodgers, 49ers going from Montana to Steve Young.
Yep.
And that actually had a lot to do with the UFL or whatever. Anyways, there was another league, so that changes things. There's no other league now. And then you had the Peyton to what's your boy, Luck? That's not a bad – USFL, sorry. But Peyton to Luck, that's pretty lucky to have a playoff team drop into last place like that. Right now, you have these older quarterbacks on all these teams that y'all have been naming. These are quarterbacks on teams that are either middle of the road or even playoff contenders, which means these teams aren't getting high picks at quarterback. Like when they're picking up their backups, they're picking up third and fourth rounders, and there's no talent there that's already ready to go into the NFL if something does happen at quarterback. So what you're looking for is, how can I keep my first-round Pro Bowl quarterback who's almost 40 years old, and then once he leaves, if I let him go, I have nothing because we weren't a bad team. We were middle of the road or a playoff contender with him. But if I keep him, I can't afford to put around the players that he needs to continue winning because he's aging. So it's a kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation with these older quarterbacks. And I think that it can easily be solved by developing younger quarterbacks, which the NFL is not doing.
Right.
If they had a developmental league, it'd be no problem. You know, you can't always get a Kurt Warner coming from Canadian Football League and greatest show on turf. That doesn't happen that often. There aren't a lot of Doug Flutys out there that are going to come from other leagues and be able to just
Steve
play.
McNair.
Right now.
Right.
Steve McNair, Steve Youngs. I'm naming these cats from back in the day because you can't name anybody now, can you? You can only name people from when there were other leagues that rivaled the NFL. That's when there was development. They were rivaling the NFL in those different leagues. And when they came to the NFL, you know, even Warren Moon came from a different league and then did well in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But now there's no competition. There's also no development. That competition is what makes development. So, it's one or two ways. Either there's another league, which we all know that's not going to happen. NFL has a stranglehold on it. Like AJT said a couple weeks ago, they're forcing the NFL down our throat, right? A developmental league is the only thing that'll save what's going on. But it's going to be interesting to see the next couple of years because I think you're going to have momentum shifts in teams and conferences and perennial teams and who's the best and who's the worst. Because some of these teams are going to go from being, okay, borderline playoffs to, shit, we can't win if we tried. Or we're going to be looking at teams that are going through 4 or 5 quarterbacks every 2 to 3 years because they're still looking for somebody they can just plug in after losing somebody like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Phillip Rivers. I mean, what are the Chargers going to do? Not that they're doing good with them, but still. 2 years ago, he took my fantasy team as far as I can go. But now look at it. But that's the situation. It's going to be really interesting to see, like what these GMs do and what these coaches do when that when that day comes that Tom Brady, suspension or not, will not be on the Patriots. Like, we're all waiting to see that day. He might be 45, but when it happens, it'll be interesting.
And I find it interesting. I look at it from this perspective of what are we? Is the NFL still going to be able to keep these casual fans who come in because of fantasy? Because we're not going to have those great quarterbacks that have been in the NFL for the last 10 years. We're not going to have the Rodgers. We're not going to have the Mannings, the Bradys, the Breezes, the Big Bens. We're not going to have the Tony Romos. We're not going to have that anymore. So we're going to have to, we'll have, people are killing Russell Wilson, but he might be the new age where you're only getting 20 touchdowns throwing the ball. You're not getting those 30, 40 touchdown passes a year because these quarterbacks aren't developing as well, so you're having to tone it down some, and it's not going to be as pass heavy. It might end up being where it reverts back to it was back in our day when it was more of a running game where you were relying on the running back, which I would love because I hate all this throwing. I hate all this throwing the ball, but once all these quarterbacks are gone, because back then because right now, when you draft a quarterback number 1 in the first round, actually second round as well, you expect them to be the starter day 1. Whereas back 10, 15 years ago, even if you draft the quarterback number 1, it wasn't given that he was going to be the opening day starter. He had to learn how to play in the NFL. You got 2-3 years to learn how to play. And then in that 3rd, 4th year, if you didn't produce, then it was you were a bust. Now, if you didn't come out the gate playing like Marcus Mariota week 1, you remember this past year, Marcus Mariota versus against Jameis Winston. Winston played terrible that first game. Marcus lit it up. And the whole year people were saying, oh, Winston's terrible. He's terrible because of that one game. But you look at the end of the year and Winston's stats, Winston's team is playing better than the Titans were and Marcus was playing. But it's that one game. If you don't come out the gate lighting it up, people just forget about it and like, oh, you're not going to be good. People getting called a bust after 1 week.
Mm-hmm. I don't know it's not a quarterback, but they talked about Brashard Perriman in Baltimore being a bust because he was out for the season.
Yeah, he's hurt. How are you a bust if you didn't get a chance to play?
Same thing with Greg Oden. People said he was a bust, and when he actually could play, he produced. He just wasn't healthy. I hope. I don't know how you don't like throwing the football. I mean, nobody wants to see 3 yards in a cloud of dust. That's just me. That's just me. I like to see quarterbacks throwing it down the field.
You're alone on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get with this. Running the ball's great. Cats like Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Adrian Peterson. I love watching cats like that play. But to me, it's nothing like throwing the ball down the field, seeing if the DB is going to break it up, seeing if the wide receiver is going to come down with it. That's just me. I hope the NFL does not go back to that, honestly. As far as the older quarterbacks, though, I was looking at Brees' contract situation. He signed a 5-year, $100 million deal back in 2012, and it was backloaded. It looks like because he had $3 million base salary in 2012, but now 19.75 mil this year. And I think that's part of the problem with the structure of the contracts, because now you have to deal with more of the situation with the cap hit, even though the cap hit is $30 million now. But you would think, I guess they anticipated him being so declined to the point where they would be able to cut him, so then you wouldn't have to pay him. Yes, he would still have the dead cap, but he wouldn't be on the cap anymore for $30 million. The dead cap is $20 million, 8.5. But the fact that he's still playing great, you can't cut him at that point because he's still playing great, and that's what the problem is. Really, if we're looking at it, how the contracts are structured. I understand they're banking on most quarterbacks being declined at that point, but most quarterbacks, most great elite quarterbacks, they generally play throughout their whole contract, and they generally earn all of that money, the base salary, the guaranteed money, signing bonus, all of that.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said. Like, you sign him to that quarterback with the expectation that by the time he hits the last year of it, he's either renegotiated or decline to the point where you can release him. But I feel like with these guys and the way the NFL is right now, that's not going to be the case anymore, or it hasn't been the case. All of these guys, with the exception of Tony Romo and Eli Manning, really are still guys playing at a high level. Tony Romo hasn't really played, but Eli Manning's looked rough the last couple seasons. So yeah,
He's
there's a
looked rough
chance.
his whole career. It's terrible. It's
Here we
terrible.
go. Here
Eli
we
is
go.
terrible.
Even from Eli's standards, he's looked pretty tough recently.
I mean, in Eli's defense, though, well, never mind. I can't even say that. Okay.
He's got
Never mind.
Odell Beckham. How you look that bad with Odell Beckham?
Right.
Yeah, okay. I was going to defend him, but I can't. I was looking at his numbers last year, and I can't. I can't. I'm sorry. I don't have anything to say.
I think that, and it's one thing that Purvis said, you end up paying these guys because you're afraid you can't get another one. Like you said, all these guys were on playoff teams. You're afraid if you let them walk and try to get a young guy in, it'll hurt your momentum trying to win a championship. But at the same time, whatever holes you do have that separate the playoff teams from the championship teams, you can't afford to address because you got a 39-year-old quarterback making $28 million. It's a no-win, in my opinion, and I don't really know how you fix it.
Well, stop paying mediocre quarterbacks like Eli and Matt Stafford. Stop paying them. Like
Jay Cutler. Stop
like
saying
Jay Cutler.
this is the year Jay Cutler turns it around. He's been in the league 13 years. He is what he is. He's not a good quarterback.
Yeah, he's not.
That's just what it is.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, but if you stop paying those quarterbacks, that's fine. What you're in the situation is you're gonna have this carousel of quarterbacks like what you have going on in you had going on in Arizona for a while. You still have going on in Cleveland. Teams are looking at those teams and like, we do not want to be that team where we can't even sell quarterback number jerseys because we're not sure they're going to be here the next season because we don't know what we're going to get from them. Like,
Yeah, but
nobody that owns a football team wants to be in that situation. And that's the situation teams are looking at when they see that, hey, when Tom Brady's gone, shit, if Garoppolo plays good for 4 games, that's it. We're not going to get that. He's going to do what was the backup from the Packers did? That crap. He's going to go somewhere and get paid off of just 4 games.
Yeah, Matt Flynn.
Yeah, Matt Flynn. He's going to pull Matt Flynn. If he plays, or Matt Castle. Shit, Matt Castle did it for the Patriots.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, you play a couple games, and people are like, shit, we're going to take him because at least we know that he can play because no one else is going to get to play. So you're not going to see what anybody else is, and that's a better look, at least that we saw him play those 4 games over these college QBs who we don't know anything about them, or these backups who don't ever develop because they don't get to play and nobody's developing them. So I'm going to take the for sure thing while I have it. So if I have a Tom Brady, I'm going to pay him because I have no idea what's coming next. And I do not want to be the Cleveland Browns of the NFL.